So good morning, Excellency, Commissioner for Peace and Security, ambassadors, colleagues, friends, welcome. We're very glad to organize this today here at the Policy Center for the New South. And I would like to thank the Commissioner for sort of being the energy behind this. He came to the Policy Center, I think, before COVID. There's always before and after COVID now. And we had a great exchange at that time. And I think he must be commended for his support and in his interest in think tanks. He's been pushing for an increased relation of the African Union, and particularly the peace and security dimension of the African Union, to reach out to think tanks. We're very glad to be part of the network he has put together, the Net for Peace network. But in general, I think this way of looking, of trying to build linkages and spaces, platforms for exchanges between operational institutions, but that have a strong need for analytical work and understanding of complex situations is essential. Peace and security is about, as of our topic today, election is about people, it's about communities, it's about politics, it's about complex behavior. And to understand complex behavior, you have to do to talk to experts and also, of course, to do research, use science, methods of science, and spend time to understand. You have to invest. The most complex thing, is to have good ideas. And often people come to you, we at the think tank, we often have, visitors coming that are in operational positions, transactional positions, where they transact all the time. Which is what you should be doing in some positions, and they often ask us for ideas, and sometimes I tell them we have no ideas. This is not ding ding, I want an idea. You have to invest to have ideas. It's the most complex things in life, I guess. Ideas, no? Science researchers, that's what they do. In any disciplines of science. And I said, look, next time, let's try to organize ourselves. So when you come back in 6 months, a year, we'll have ideas. To harvest, you need to plant. And that's exactly what we do with think tanks. And I think that that's more and more becoming a practice in Africa. And institutions like the African Union, but governments as well, but can really contribute for this to happen. It's a sort of virtuous circle between ideas, decision-making, science. We operate in the same space. And if we would behave like decision makers, being very transactional, we won't be doing our job as think tanks. So I think there's a nice way to organize ourselves. And in particular, because we are at the crossroad of academia, civil service, decision-making, and civil society. So I think that's, once again, really heartfelt thanks from our community beyond the Policy Center, for our community to have created this space and these opportunities. On today's topic, election and democracy in Africa, I'm not a specialist, but I have colleagues that work on those issues. Elections in Africa remain, we have to say, a challenge. They're not within the realms of normality in many countries, unfortunately. They are in some, but not in all countries. And the worst thing in societies is, of course, to have setbacks, regressions that are very costly for poverty, peace, and security. So it is of utmost importance that we make sure, as Africans, that we have smooth transitions, efficient efficient sort of organizations of elections, fair elections, equitable elections, etc. And this is a topic for Africans. It is for us, within the continent to sort of organize ourselves. And I think there was an event the day before, and it's exactly the messages that were discussed and that you, Commissioner, and our Minister of Foreign Affairs were sent to during this meeting. And it's not only for moral or equitable question or values, etc. Of course it is, but it's also for efficiency purposes. It has to be efficient, so we have the buy-in of populations. And we're seeing the same kind of issues in advanced economies where democracy is being challenged all around the world because it has to deliver for the middle class and broader components of society. And if it doesn't deliver for, delivering means, increased standard livings, jobs, employment, protection, social provision of public services, etc., it is in question. So it's not just an aspiration, a moral sort of magister. It is also a call for efficiency, a call for delivering for the most vulnerable of our populations. And I think this is a challenge that we share, around the world, not only in Africa, but also in advanced economies, as we see the polarization of society. The mechanics of democracy, which is electoral elections, and the mechanics in the end are just a mean for an objective. And countries can organize themselves as they see fit. But there are values and principles that we all aspire to, as human beings, fairness, equity, justice, of course, protection, stability, property rights, living peacefully in our communities. And these are the values we share. We partner a lot with the advanced think tanks in advanced economies, and they often, the word of the day, and I think it's important we share this with you, the word of the day is that we in the South, of course Africa, but beyond, do not share the universal values anymore. We are questioning the universal value of the West. I always say it's not true. We continue to share those values. It's just the way we organize ourselves to put them in practice and deliver for our population is not necessary. It's not in question, but the type of electoral democracy and the type of metrics you may use are not necessarily, I think, a good metric, a good criteria to measure that. So I think it's a strong message we need to continue to have as countries of the New South, that we still believe on those universal value, definitely, and I think that's the endeavor, that's the, since humanity started, even a very small community, there was also always the issue of leadership and how we organize ourselves in community. This is what it is about. And I think this will remain an important issue for us, and it will be for us Africans here, but and the world in general. So you can count on our support, commissioners and all participants. Once again, let me thank you and your team for helping us organize this and for choosing the Policy Center here in Rabat to have an exchange. We have great panels coming of specialists, and also thanks to my colleagues here at the Policy Center for putting this together, and looking forward to exchange with you during this half-day conference. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me now in welcoming His Excellency Ambassador Bankole Adeoye, Commissioner for Political Affairs at the African Union, for a keynote speech.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Executive President of the Policy Center of the New South. First, let me welcome you because I believe you delivered the keynote statement. Excellency, first, I will want to thank the government of the Kingdom of Morocco for really having us as the team from the African Union, our course participants. And this policy center is one of our most prominent, reputable think tanks in the network for peace, as you stated. I'm going to be, as you said, going to probe since we are in a center for ideas. And Africa is certainly looking for solutions. We're looking for, not for an ideology, but for solutions to make our continent better. I would also want to ask a number of questions to the audience. Is there an African democracy? Does it exist? You talked about universal values. We speak in the African Union of shared values. We have set up a number of norms to guide our work. Can Africa define its own democracy? Or should Africa define its own democracy? How best do we see today's world? Most important for me is democracy and elections that we are discussing today. And I'll put that in two categories. Democracy is what? Not just the usual trite government by the people, for the people. Democracy is to deliver public goods. One, elections are what? Elections will help with choice of leadership. Simple. If you see democracy in the context of delivering services, the best healthcare, the best educational facilities, the best infrastructure, Africa should be and remain on the right track. Agenda 2063 was set up by the African Union with our 7 aspirations. But for today, I will want to look at 2 trends, the global and the African. What do we see in the global space today? We see, first, the rise of popular conservative nationalism. Ours alone, in a little cocoon, in a little space, rising in America, rising in the West. Anti-migration, anti-multilateralism, and very conservative about democracy. Second trend is the impact of technology on democracy and elections, where today the United States Senate, the Congress, is discussing banning TikTok, accusing each other of interference in elections. These are the perspectives I'm trying to share. We see as well an undemocratic international peace and security system that reflects 1945, the end of the Cold War. Not the New South, not today's world, not the youth in this room, not the plethora of our ideas and content. 79 years on, 5 members of the UN Security Council dictate the global order. Outside Africa, in the global south, we see a trend that is diminishing. Military rule is going down. But in Africa, it is going up. There's only one country, to the best of my recollection, that is military today in the world, Myanmar, in Asia. We see more of elections becoming demand-driven. The voice of the youth, the voice of women, necessary. We see in the global space terrorism, violent extremism expanding, trying to make Africa its capital, and yet fundamental freedoms and human rights are being trampled upon. 30 years of democracy, majority rule in South Africa. 30 years of genocide, remembrance. How do we put all this together? We see the carnage, and the world is watching helplessly in Gaza. We see the unnecessary war in Ukraine. So where are we locally on our continent? What are the trends specific to Africa? One is unconstitutional changes of government, where voting rights for the 6 countries in the African Union currently suspended has become a challenge. We also see constitutionalism being fully respected, the rule of law is taking shape in many of our countries. Without the fanfare, Senegal, Liberia, smooth transition to opposition. But I can also go back to Cape Verde, to Sao Tome, to Kenya, to Zambia, that have also had more or less opposition winning elections. As the executive president said, elections remain challenging. But it's the only way to choose our leaders. Do we get the right leaders? Do the voters show the need for the right choice? But in those elections, we see also that the dividends of democracy are being questioned by the voters. In response, they sit at home. They do not vote. And those who vote want their vote to count. They challenge the integrity, the credibility of the elections. They are worried with the low confidence they themselves exhibit with the political class as well as the system as a whole. Then, in all this, we see the seemingly endless elections, political transitions. The political transitions are becoming themselves the issue because there is no transition. But we have transitions, like in South Africa, that is 30 years. We have transition, like in my country, Nigeria, that is 25 years, uninterrupted. We have transition in Ghana that is almost 30 years. So transitions must be grounded in the end result of choice of the leadership. The trend of over-centralization of power also is a trend that we must converse about. We have to also note that the role of the parliament, the role of the judiciary in the separation of powers, which is classical in the Jeffersonian tradition, we need to see that this worked for the good of the continent. So with these trends, what does the African Union? How do we respond to these trends? What are the tools in our kitty? What are we all about? The first is that we continue to deploy in a more robust, structured manner election observation missions. Democracy is rooted in the grassroots. It's rooted at national level. Democracy is not rooted at the global level. It is localized. Each country comes up with its own democratic electoral process, but the standards are universally acceptable, and the standards are continentally determined by the African Union, working with all the regional economic communities. These election missions, observation missions, must be grounded in the best independent frame of mind. And that is why today we are here in Rabat with over 70 trainees. We are looking at building a mass of confident, able, independent-minded Africans to observe elections and contribute to the improvement, gradual, step-by-step improvement in democracy. We have also introduced post-election mediation and preventive diplomacy, where the elections, where the early signs, early warning require early action. And this we kickstarted in Zambia, August 2021, up to Lesotho, to Nigeria, to many, many countries now in our kitty. Gambia, and so many of them, including last one in Senegal and Comoros. The idea is that we have to build a democratic culture that is acceptable to both the stakeholders, particularly women and youth, but also the elderly. Ladies and gentlemen, what else is the African Union doing with elections, with best practices, and with lessons learned? Is to develop a structure for the knowledge for peace. A campaign that will showcase the best practices as well as looking at the areas for improvement. So we've developed an annual report that looks at democracy at work for 2022, and in 2023, past year, we collate the contemporary good practices. The idea is that we have to remain focused on delivering together and knowing that we pass the knowledge to think tanks like the Policy Center for the New South. We pass the knowledge to universities, to the academia, and to stakeholders to see what went wrong or what worked in A or B countries. This knowledge for peace is what we will build on. We are also working to do one thing, and this brings me to another definition of democracy. Democracy, elections. Democracy is simply when you have public institutions that respond to the needs of the people. So our focus is on our election management bodies. And one of the trends that we see, which we have to be proud of, is that more of our electoral bodies are becoming more and more capable. They are building the capacity locally. They are doing better in terms of election management, yet we have plethora of challenges. But remember, we're a developing continent. We're a member of the Global South. And that means there are usually challenges with infrastructure. There are usually challenges with protection of the credibility of the elections. We have also, at the political level, continued to emphasize 3 major declarations that speak and take forward the African Charter on Democracy, Elections, and Governance. One is the Accra Declaration against unconstitutional changes of government. The second is the Malabo Declaration of May 2022 that speaks about counterterrorism and the impact also on unconstitutional changes of government. And recently in Abuja, the high-level meeting on counterterrorism also came up with the role of institutions as watchdogs, the role of actors as watchdogs for democracy. I believe our panel members who will be coming on board will do justice to some of these issues, but let me emphasize that as we innovate with the training in Morocco and going forward in Nairobi next week with the youth, we will continue to contribute to stakeholders' role. We will work closely with the regional economic communities so that democracy can thrive. We have to work together to build a democratic Africa, an Africa that is also peaceful. Democracy without peace will not be stable. You need the peace to build democracy, and you need democracy to assure you that peace will also reign. I thank you so much.